She's not a soldier, she's a liability. She talks, not fights. That's what my father told an entire room of officers, right before they tried to kill me. But he didn't know I'd already learned to turn silence into a weapon. I'm Captain Selah Raines, 35, and the Army called me Whisper, because I saved lives without ever pulling a trigger. But when my own family betrayed me, I didn't whisper. I exposed everything. Like, comment and subscribe if you haven't yet, and let's begin. Linguistic skills. Utterly useless, my father roared, and every head turned to me. It was as if a thunderclap had cracked through the Pentagon auditorium. The air stiffened. Breaths caught. I sat frozen in the 10th row, my Army service uniform pulled tight across my shoulders, suddenly less like a badge of pride and more like a shroud. The sound of his voice, familiar and impossible to ignore, rang out through the sleek surround system of the Department of Defense's most sacred ceremonial hall. All I could do was breathe slowly, shallowly, and wish the ground beneath me would open up and pull me into the concrete depths below. My name is Captain Selah Raines, 35 years old, U.S. Army Military Police Corps. On this particular Tuesday morning, I was not a respected officer. I was not even a daughter. I was an embarrassment in dress blues. To my right, two captains whispered behind gloved hands. To my left, a lieutenant colonel furrowed his brow, trying to piece together who my father's tirade was targeting. But they all found me eventually. The only person in this room who could fit the label he had just used, soft bookworm, the one fluent in 7 languages. The one called Whisper in field reports. The one General Calvin Raines never claimed publicly as his daughter unless it boosted his own image. He stood tall in the VIP section, his silhouette sharp and crisp uniform still adorned with ribbons from a war he'd long since retired from. He hadn't aged, at least not visibly. His jaw was granite. His expression was the same unflinching wall I had grown up staring at over dinner tables and across parade grounds. Next to him, of course, was Jesse, my brother. Major Jesse Raines, West Point royalty combat-tested heir to the Raines legacy. His smirk at that moment was as bright and poisonous as a cut diamond. The master of ceremonies had barely begun. A decorated colonel, his voice smooth and practiced, had stepped to the podium just moments earlier. We wish to honor an officer, he'd said, whose contributions, while often unpublicized, have saved lives through cross-cultural negotiation and advanced field linguistics in conflict zones abroad. I'd known the moment he said unpublicized. I felt the knot tighten in my chest. My name was coming. My secret work, briefed only at high levels, was about to step into the spotlight, and I wanted to vanish. My father knew too. His body language said it all, the slow rise of his shoulders, the tightening of his jaw. And then he stood. Without warning, without invitation, he stood. I have to say this, he barked, his voice slicing through the colonel's speech like a bayonet. The colonel faltered. Silence spread through the room like a virus. No one moved. No one breathed. My father didn't speak to the stage. He spoke to the entire auditorium. Linguistic skills, he sneered. 7 languages, all utterly useless. The Army needs warriors. Men who can pull a trigger, not soft bookworms. I stopped breathing. I couldn't look at him. I couldn't look at Jesse. I couldn't even look at my lap, which was suddenly trembling beneath my white gloves. Every face in the room turned. A slow ripple of confusion, then recognition. They were putting it together. I was the only Raines who spoke 7 languages. I was the one with the nickname Whisper. I was the target. In front of 4-star generals, diplomats, foreign attachés, and my peers, I had been publicly gutted. And Jesse stood beside him like a marble statue of smugness. He didn't wince, didn't flinch, didn't stop him. This had been planned, or at the very least anticipated. And I, the daughter who read French poetry as a child while Jesse learned to shoot at 12, was the sacrificial lamb at the altar of military masculinity. The blood in my veins felt thick and cold. My ears rang. My father's voice, the one I had heard in countless speeches and reprimands, boomed in my skull. I was humiliated, exposed, flayed open. Then from the front row, a single figure stood. calmly, deliberately. The air changed again. General Russell Shepard, commander of the United States Army Criminal Investigation Division, rose to his full height, tall, lean, and silent. He didn't say much. He never did. But his eyes could slice through concrete. He turned to the podium. "Get Captain Rains up here," he said. His voice was cool and quiet, but it didn't need volume. It carried authority. "We need whisper." For a beat, no one moved. Then the colonel stepped aside. A stunned hush fell over the room as I slowly stood, my legs wobbling beneath me. And then one by one they stood. First a young lieutenant rose to attention, then a major, then a colonel in the aisle beside me, and then the ripple became a wave. Rows of officers across the auditorium stood at attention, saluting, not to my father, not to my brother, to me. I walked. Past Jesse, who suddenly had no smirk. Past my father, who didn't speak, didn't move. But his eyes met mine. For once, they didn't burn with disappointment. They burned with something else. Something smaller. Something terrified. The moment should have felt like victory. It didn't. Not yet. Because inside, beneath the fabric of my uniform and the weight of 1,000 stares, I still felt like the girl who never belonged. The girl with the envelope that no one opened. Thanksgiving, age 17. My acceptance letter to Georgetown lies stained in cranberry sauce beside the turkey bones. The smell of roasting turkey had filled our Fort Riley duplex since early morning, but the warmth it promised never reached the walls of our home. My mother had been gone for 3 years, and what was left of our family ran like a drill schedule, precise, cold, efficient. My father presided over holidays the same way he did battalion briefings, no deviation, no softness, no unnecessary chatter. That evening, relatives filled the dining room. Aunts and uncles with military pedigrees of their own, all eager to hear from the crown jewel of the Rains family, my brother Jesse. He'd come home from his first semester at West Point, bronze complexion, perfectly cropped hair, and that effortless charm that made people lean in. He didn't have to demand attention. He attracted it like a magnet. I, on the other hand, felt like I'd shown up to a party with the wrong invitation. I wore a burgundy dress I'd ironed twice. My hair was pinned. My voice was quiet. As everyone settled around the long oak table, the conversation spun into orbit around Jesse. "Tell us about your survival training. Did you really lead that platoon simulation? What do your instructors say about you?" He answered with humble smiles. "And I'm just trying my best." But I could see the pride glowing in his eyes, and I sat there half-smiling, fingers pressed against the edge of my plate, willing my moment to come. It sat tucked in my pocket, a thick, cream-colored envelope from Georgetown University. A full-ride scholarship to their prestigious School of Languages and Linguistics. My dream. As the last bite of stuffing disappeared and the plates clinked with pie forks, I reached into my dress and pulled it out. "Dad," I said softly, sliding it toward him across the table. "I have something." The conversation quieted. He glanced at the envelope. The bold Navy seal of Georgetown caught the light. For a second, I saw a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. But then, without opening it, he placed it beside the half-carved turkey carcass where bones and greasy napkins piled like refuse. He looked up at me, then past me. "A linguistic scholarship," he announced to the table. His voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. "More books." "Great." He gestured to Jesse with his fork, smearing a bit of gravy across the handle. "Your brother's learning to lead a company of soldiers. That's the future. That's strength." My heart shriveled. I sat frozen, my hands limp in my lap. Every pair of eyes around the table turned away from me with the same awkward grace people reserve for funeral homes. One of my uncles cleared his throat and reached for his wine. Someone coughed. No one spoke. Then Jesse, always the actor, let out a half laugh. "I mean, Georgetown's not West Point, but hey, it's something." He shrugged and took another bite of pie. And just like that, it was over. My moment, my achievement, my escape all tossed aside like a used napkin. My name wasn't mentioned again that evening, but Jesse's, oh, they toasted him. To Cadet Jesse Raines, the pride of the family, hear, hear, to the next general. Raines. The clinking of glasses sounded like gunfire in my ears. I didn't eat dessert. I excused myself early, claiming a headache. Upstairs in my bedroom, the faint sounds of laughter rose through the floorboards. I sat on the edge of my bed in silence. Then I pulled out my mother's old French dictionary, the one she used to read to me when I was little. She had been the only person who understood why I loved languages. She used to tell me that words could build bridges, that understanding someone in their own tongue was the most intimate form of respect. I opened the book, tracing my fingers along the pages. I couldn't cry, not fully. I held everything inside like I always did. But the tears came anyway, quiet and hot, soaking the paper as I clutched it to my chest. The envelope lay beside me on the bed, a corner now marked with a scarlet streak of cranberry sauce. That red smear felt like a wound. And as I sat there in the dark, listening to the muffled cheers for my brother, something inside me broke. Or maybe it formed, a shape I didn't yet recognize. Not bitterness, not yet, but clarity. This house, this family, this game, it was rigged. There was no fair fight, no point in playing when the rules had been written generations ago. Jesse had been born the winner. I was the leftover piece. And I realized then that I didn't need their rules. I didn't need their table. I would build my own. That night I made a vow. I wouldn't chase his approval anymore. Not my father's, not my brother's, not anyone who thought power only came from command and force. I would find my own strength. I would build my own legacy. One forged not in noise but in precision. Not in brute force but in fluency. Words would be my weapon. And one day they would regret ever calling me soft. I folded the letter, cleaned the envelope as best I could, and slid it between the pages of the dictionary. It still rests there, a blood-stained reminder of the moment I stopped being their daughter and started becoming myself. They called me Dictionary. They meant it as a joke, but I wore it like a second set of armor. Fort Drum was a different kind of cold. Not just the brutal wind that knifed in from Canada and settled into your bones, but the kind of cold that hung in the eyes of the people you worked with. Especially if you were different. Especially if you were me. When I arrived, my boots barely broken in, and my Georgetown degree tucked into my file like an afterthought. I was the only female officer in my MP unit, and the only one who had studied linguistics, cultural anthropology, and international negotiation instead of battlefield tactics and law enforcement basics. That wasn't a curiosity, it was a threat. The moment I introduced myself at our first morning briefing, I saw it in their faces. Captain Sela Raines, MP, fluent in Farsi, Pashto, Dari, Russian, French, Serbian, and Tagalog. Their smiles didn't quite reach their eyes. They didn't know what to do with me, so they made fun of me. "Hey, Dictionary," someone would say across the room, usually when I offered a translation no one asked for. "Georgetown, your book club meeting run late last night." "Careful, boys. She might start conjugating verbs at us." I stayed quiet. Every time. Not because I didn't know how to fight back, but because I had learned a long time ago, let them underestimate you. Let them get comfortable. Then surprise them. Even my commanding officer, Major Harlan, wasn't subtle. A stocky, red-faced career MP who still believed muscle beat method. He said it during our first one-on-one, "Look, Raines, I've got door kickers. I don't need a walking thesaurus. Just don't get in the way." So they gave me the scraps. Translating seized documents, reviewing patrol footage with foreign nationals in the background. Stuff they thought a machine could do better. I did it all without complaint. But I didn't waste my time. I stayed late. Got in early. Built my own system. While they were running drills, I was mapping linguistic tics and tonal shifts in interrogations. I analyzed cadence patterns, verb inversions, stress markers in polyglot suspects. I read books on micro-expressions, forensic psychology, and deception theory. I ordered them myself, had them shipped to my room one box at a time. My quarters looked more like a graduate research library than an officer's barracks. I didn't care. I wasn't there to decorate. I was there to build a weapon no one could see coming. The opportunity came 6 months in. An internal arms smuggling ring had been bleeding weapons off base for months. Dozens of rifles, tactical gear, and ammunition vanished. No suspects, no leads. They had one guy in custody, a civilian contractor with no known connections, and a smug look on his face that said, "You can't touch me." The interrogators had tried everything: threats, bargains, silence. Nothing cracked him. Then Harlan showed up at my door one afternoon, expression grim like he'd just bitten into a lemon. "You speak a rare dialect of Pashto, right? Something from a valley. Can't pronounce it." I nodded. "Get to the interrogation room. Try your magic." I didn't respond. I just grabbed my notes and walked out. The room smelled like old coffee and bad intentions. The man across the table didn't look dangerous, just tired. Hardened. Resigned. He didn't flinch when I walked in. He didn't speak. I didn't start with questions. I started with poetry. I quoted a line from a Pashto poem his people would know. Then another. Then I asked about his village, his father's orchard, his mother's stories. I told him I'd read about his region's water politics, about the impact of NATO convoys on the local economy. He stared at me, silent. Then something shifted. His shoulders relaxed, his jaw unclenched. It wasn't that he trusted me. It was that I had spoken to him in a way he understood not just his language, but his world. I didn't bring up the weapons until 2 hours in. By then, the conversation had turned into a thread of shared understanding. When I finally asked about the smuggling, he didn't deny it. He just sighed and began to talk. He gave me names, schedules, contacts. He drew a map on a legal pad, hands steady, voice low. No one needed to raise a fist. All I did was speak. I walked out of that room with a signed confession in one hand and a complete network profile in the other. The office was loud when I entered, phones ringing, chatter papers shuffling. Then someone noticed the document in my hand. Silence fell like a dropped pin. I handed the file to Harlan. He scanned the top page, then the next, eyes flicking across the confession. He looked up at me. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came. Just a nod. One sharp, deliberate nod. No jokes, no sarcasm. Just recognition. That was all I needed. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I turned and walked back to my desk. That night, I sat alone in my room. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even open a drink. I just pulled my mother's old dictionary from the shelf and laid it open beside me. There between the pages was the Georgetown envelope. Still stained. Still heavy. For the first time, I realized something they'd never understand: the weapon I'd built. Not Jesse. Not my father. Maybe not even most of the army. But I didn't need them to. I was done asking to be seen. Because now I was undeniable. When he showed up with a pepperoni pizza at 9 p.m., I knew Eli wasn't like the others. It was a bitter February night at Fort Drum. The wind had been howling since dusk, finding its way through every gap in the aging building's windows, rattling the glass like bones in a bag. I was hunched over my desk in the Intel annex, surrounded by transcripts, half-written reports, and cold coffee. The lights buzzed overhead, a reminder that even silence had a sound in this place. Then he walked in. No knock, just the creak of the door and the soft thud of boots. Warrant Officer Eli Mercer, Cyber Intel Specialist, eyes sharp and tired beneath a knit watch cap. He said nothing at first, just held up the pizza box like a peace offering. "I figured you hadn't eaten," he said. "Didn't look like you were planning to." He wasn't wrong. I'd met Eli 2 weeks earlier at a joint debrief between MPs and Cyber Command. We were both there to report on an overlapping investigation, mine from the physical intel side, his from the digital. He didn't talk much during the meeting. He watched, listened. And when I presented my linguistics-based suspect analysis, I noticed something rare in the room full of data heads and dogmatists. He was taking notes. Afterwards, he approached me. No ego, no small talk. That syntax analysis on your suspect when he switched verb structures while talking logistics, he said that's not in any doctrine I've seen. That's art. No one had ever used that word for what I did. Art. They called it soft skills, niche, fringe, a weird hobby with a clearance level. But Eli, he saw it, really saw it. We started talking about code and culture, about how people like networks have backdoors and patterns tells that don't show up in the usual scans. He described his work like poetry, how every hacker has a voice. Some were arrogant, overcomplicating their code just to flex. Some were sloppy. Some were paranoid, layering their work in misdirection and digital shadows. He could read them like I read people. One night over email, he sent me a single line, "You decode people, I decode systems. Same game, different board." That night I printed it out and tacked it above my desk, which brought us to the pizza. He didn't ask if he could stay. He just sat across from me, placed the box between us, cracked open a can of Coke, and opened his laptop. We didn't talk about the case. We didn't talk about Fort Drum. We didn't talk about the half-healed bruise on my cheek from a training op that went sideways, or the fact that my team still saw me as the dictionary girl who got lucky. We just worked. Every now and then he'd slide a slice my way. I'd nod. He'd glance at my notes. I'd peek at his code. Silence stretched comfortably between us, filled with the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional sigh from the HVAC system. It was the first time in a long time that silence didn't feel like punishment. Eventually we paused. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "You ever read Brené Brown?" he asked. I blinked. Not exactly standard army reading. He chuckled softly. "She talks about vulnerability. That courage isn't about being fearless, it's about showing up when you're terrified, and doing it anyway." I said nothing, but the words sank in deeper than I wanted to admit. He reached into his bag and pulled out a dog-eared book of poetry. He slid it toward me. Maya Angelou. Still, I rise. "I read it when the silence gets heavy," he said. I opened the book and skimmed the first few lines. "You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies." My throat tightened. I looked away. "I know it's not doctrine," he added, almost sheepish, "but it reminds me I'm not what they say I am, and neither are you." I swallowed hard. No one had ever said something like that to me. Not without trying to spin it into a command or a critique, not without strings. He didn't offer advice. He didn't tell me to toughen up. He didn't try to fix me. He just brought pizza, and poetry, and silence that didn't judge me. Later that night, long after he left, I sat alone in that fluorescent-lit office and stared at the empty box, the half-read poem still open in front of me. It wasn't just that Eli understood my work. It was that he respected it. That he didn't try to measure me against my father or my brother, or the 1,000 voices that told me empathy didn't belong in a uniform. He never asked me to be louder, stronger, harder. He just saw me. That night changed something, subtly, quietly, like thaw meeting frozen earth. For the first time in my career, and maybe in my life, I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight of who I wasn't. For the first time, I felt less alone. And in the echoing cold of Fort Drum, that was everything. Just soften the report. Do it for the family. My father's voice chilled me more than the Bosnian wind ever could. And that wind was no joke, sharp enough to peel skin, endless as the gray sky that hung over Camp Zephyr. But his voice. It reached straight through my Kevlar vest and iced the bones underneath. I was stationed in Bosnia, embedded with a conflict resolution task force. My work wasn't glamorous. No parades, no medals. I spent my days mediating between fractured factions, two local leaders with decades of blood between them, and barely enough trust to sit at the same table. But we were making progress. Lives were being saved, one phrase, one handshake at a time. I was in my quarters when the call came. The moment I saw the number flash on my sat phone US. Area code government line. My stomach twisted. I hadn't spoken to my father in over a year. "Sela," he said with that clipped tone he always used when pretending to play nice. "How's the mission?" I should have hung up then. But I didn't. "Busy," I replied. "Effective. What do you need?" "You're working with Avalar Logistics over there, right?" he asked. "They handle your comms and drone recon." "Some of it," I said, cautious. "Why?" There was a pause. Then a new voice. Slicker. More casual. "Hey, little sis. Jesse." I could feel the trap tightening before it snapped. "We've got a situation," my father said. "There's a congressional subcommittee looking into Avalar's equipment compliance. Red tape nonsense. The kind of thing that could spook contracts and damage careers. Careers. Not lives. I need you to soften your findings," he continued as if asking me to pick up milk on the way home. "A few technical issues, fine, but no language that implies negligence. Emphasize their operational resilience. Just give the investigators the picture we need." I stood frozen, the satellite phone pressed against my ear, heart thudding in my chest. He wasn't just asking me to lie. He was asking me to falsify a field report, an offense that could cost me my career, my clearance, and possibly my freedom. "Dad." "That's illegal," I said quietly. "And unethical. It's a direct violation of Article 92 under the UCMJ. "Oh, don't quote the damn manual at me." He snapped his mask, slipping. "I served 40 years. You think I don't know what's at stake?" Then Jesse piped in again, his voice all mock affection. "Come on, Sela, don't be dramatic. This is your chance to actually help the family name. Do something useful for once." Useful. That word hit harder than any sniper round. My throat tightened, but my voice stayed steady. "I will not," I said. And I hung up. 3 days later, we were ambushed. I remember the exact moment the world went sideways. We were inside a safe house near the Drina River, preparing for a high-risk reconciliation session. It was a concrete shell of a building, no windows, thick walls, supposedly secure. The comms had been glitchy all morning, static, interrupting every transmission. The Avalar techs chalked it up to weather. I should have known better. It started with a voice in my earpiece. Not one of my men. Not our translator. A new voice. Male. Calm. Cold. Speaking perfect Serbian. "Malaka," he said. Little whisper. "Is your father disappointed in you?" My blood went still. Only 4 people knew that nickname. 1 was dead. 2 were in the US. The last had just tried to use me to commit fraud. Before I could react, the first explosion hit. Glass shattered inward. Gunfire tore through the silence like thunder. I hit the floor, dragging one of the faction leaders with me as bullets punched through the walls like paper. Smoke filled the air. Screams echoed off the concrete. My team responded with instinct and precision, but it was no good. We were boxed in. A kill zone. A bullet grazed my shoulder, burning like a white-hot iron across skin and bone. Blood soaked my sleeve. I pushed it aside, crawled to my radio, and screamed into it for evac. One of my soldiers, a young specialist named Keating, never made it to cover. He died 10 feet from me trying to protect one of the diplomats. I can still see his eyes wide and disbelieving, staring at the ceiling as the life drained out of him. It took 47 minutes for air support to arrive. When they did, the gunmen vanished like ghosts. Professionals. Paid, trained, prepared. They knew our location, our timing, even our code words. Someone had leaked everything. The medics patched me up. 23 stitches. Clean exit wound. The physical damage was manageable. The rest wasn't. Back at camp, I locked the door to my quarters and sat in silence. I stared at my uniform shirt, blood-dried and rust-colored now. I thought about the voice on the radio, about the word he used. Whisper. I thought about Jesse's smugness, about my father's veiled threat, about the tone in his voice when he reminded me who gave me my name. They hadn't just disowned me. They had tried to erase me. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. And that realization was colder than any Bosnian night. They had chosen reputation over family, power over blood. And now they were going to learn what happened when the family embarrassment the soft bookworm fought back. Not with fire, not with fury, but with silence, with precision, with the truth. I got it, Eli said. Your brother. On tape. It's all there. His voice came through the encrypted line low and steady, but it might as well have been a thunderclap. I was standing alone in the dim records vault at Fort Belvoir, surrounded by manila folders and gray filing cabinets that smelled like disuse and quiet death. I closed the file I hadn't really been reading and leaned hard against the cold metal. Play it, I said. There was a pause. Then Jesse's voice. Crisp. Unmistakable. Casual. My father's done his part. Pressure's on. Now it's your turn. Just make sure the incident is convincing enough to shut her up permanently. I didn't move. Couldn't. The line crackled, and then Eli added, the CEO pushed back. Called it risky. Your brother corrected him. Said it wasn't a risk. It was a solution. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to breathe. And the funds. Transferred the next day, Eli replied. Signed off digitally by your father. I verified the encryption Army Key Level 6 clearance. It's real Sela. I let the silence stretch between us. Not because I doubted him. I didn't. But because something inside me had finally snapped into place. The spinning compass I'd carried for decades, the one that kept trying to point toward approval, toward home, stilled. The needle landed on one true direction forward. After the ambush in Bosnia, I had been pulled from the field and reassigned to an admin post at Fort Belvoir. No hearing, no debrief, just an informal order from command. Until the investigation concludes, we believe it's safer you serve stateside. Safer. Translation silenced. They buried me under reports, logistics schedules, and risk assessments. I was a ghost in khaki, forgotten if they had their way. But they didn't know I had Eli, and they didn't understand that silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. The day after I arrived at Belvoir, I started digging. Not publicly, quietly, with gloves on. I used my clearance to pull Avalar Logistics performance reports and cross-checked them with system logs equipment, failure notices, and satellite maintenance records. It was all corporate scrubbed nonsense on the surface, phrases like modular resilience, anticipated wear rate variance, and environmental deviation adjustments. Translation nothing. Words that said less than silence. But I knew where to look. I knew what grammar looked like when it was lying. I spotted inconsistencies. Small ones at first, phrases used out of place, tenses that didn't align, then embedded fields that didn't match internal timestamps. Every doctored report had a rhythm, and once I heard the beat, I couldn't unhear it. While I traced the language, Eli hit the code. The servers from the Bosnia mission had been declared compromised, the logs corrupted due to technical fault. But Eli knew better. He once told me a cover-up in a server is like a body in fresh snow. You can hide it, but you'll never hide the tracks. He didn't try to repair the corrupted files. He read the metadata, timestamps, access keys, session logs, residual fingerprints left by careless arrogance. And there it was. At 0200 hours the morning of the ambush, someone accessed the comms server from an unauthorized terminal, routed through a dead satellite node, and bounced off a US-owned relay. Eli followed it like a hound on scent until he hit gold. The connection traced to a closed port inside Avalar's secure comms lab. A port opened with a single-use encrypted key. That key belonged to a laptop assigned to one man, Major Jesse Raines. The same day, a confidential contract addendum was uploaded to the Pentagon procurement system. Avalar's budget increased by 8 figures. Untraceable oversight clause. signed at 0947 hours, by General Calvin Rains. It wasn't just circumstantial, it was a digital paper trail scorched into the system like branding iron marks. Together, Eli and I reconstructed the full sequence. From my father's call to the server breach, to the explosion and the payoff. Every step aligned, every lie confirmed. My ambush wasn't collateral. It was policy. And I was the problem they meant to solve. I remember sitting in my apartment that night, the one-bedroom box they gave me with a couch too stiff and lights too dim, staring at my computer screen. The audio file played one more time, looping Jesse's voice back at me like a ghost laughing in the walls. Just make sure the incident is convincing enough. My hands trembled, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I opened a new folder. I named it Witness. Into it, I dropped every file we had. The altered reports, the metadata logs, the server breach, the contract. My father's signature, the full audio. I encrypted it with a rotating triple key. Then I drafted the message. To General Russell Shepard, subject breach of integrity, immediate review requested General. This file contains evidence of criminal conspiracy, gross misconduct, and attempted assassination. All actions implicate high-ranking officers and contractors currently serving or connected to the U.S. military. This is not about loyalty. It's about honor. The Army's is at stake. Captain Sela Rains. I hit send. Then I sat back in my chair and stared at the blank wall across from me. The silence in the room wasn't empty. It was thick, charged, like air before a storm. I didn't feel fear. I felt ready. They wanted a ghost fine. I had just become one with teeth. The file was sent. The evidence was undeniable. And the next time they called for a ceremony, it wouldn't be to decorate a war hero. It would be to bury a lie. They thought it was another Lifetime Achievement Award. They didn't see the guillotine coming. The Pentagon auditorium looked exactly as it had the day my father publicly humiliated me. Same flags, same polished brass railings, same cold reverence in the air like history was watching. But this time, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel small. I felt like the eye of a storm I had conjured myself. I sat in the 5th row, perfectly still in my Army service uniform, every line pressed, every ribbon earned. My shoulder had healed, but a pale scar still lay beneath the fabric. A reminder of the bullet they meant to bury me with. The room buzzed with anticipation. My father, General Calvin Rains, was the guest of honor. They were here to crown him with another medal to eulogize him before he even died. His name had once been gospel in these halls. They didn't know yet that I'd turned it into a warning. He sat on stage beside my brother Jesse, both of them calm, confident. My father wore his decorations like armor. Jesse wore a smug grin, perfectly composed as if nothing could touch him. The announcer began, his voice flowing like silk. Today we recognize General Rains for a distinguished career in service to his country. A leader, a warrior, a legacy, he went on. Stories of command, sacrifice, strategy. A few forced laughs from the audience. It was performance. Theater. Then General Shepard rose from his seat. He wasn't scheduled to speak. He stepped to the podium without ceremony, his movements precise, his expression unreadable. The room hushed. Even the air seemed to pause. I'd like to add a few words, he said, his voice smooth as a blade. First, he praised my father's past. A brief acknowledgement of career accomplishments. A few nods from the front rows. Then his tone shifted, ever so slightly. But before we close this ceremony, Shepard continued, there's one more matter. A pressing issue. One not of legacy, but of integrity. A murmur rippled through the room. On the massive screen behind the stage, a diagram appeared, a network map of server traffic. Unusual to most. Familiar to me. This is a visual log of a breach that occurred during a peacekeeping mission in Bosnia, Shepard said. An unauthorized access to secure military comms. The source A port linked to a defense contractor. Avalar Logistics. He clicked a button. The image zoomed in. Dates, timestamps, a highlighted IP address. Further review revealed the access was granted using a key tied to a U.S. Army laptop assigned to Major Jesse Raines. Gasps. Audible this time. The shift from curiosity to suspicion was immediate. I looked at Jesse. His smile faltered. My father turned toward him. Just a glance. But it cracked the image. Shepard continued. The day following this breach, a contract was amended quietly. Funds approved. Oversight waived. Signature, another slide. A digital form blown up across the screen. There beneath the clause authorizing a $12. 4 million bump was my father's name. General Calvin Raines. Date. Clearance code. Fingerprint ID. Silence. Then with quiet gravity, Shepard said, "Now the context." And he played the audio. Jesse's voice filled the auditorium, amplified and unavoidable. "My father's done his part. Pressure's on. Now it's your turn. Just make sure the incident is convincing enough to shut her up permanently." No one moved. No one breathed. It was as if the room had been locked in a vacuum. I watched the blood drain from Jesse's face. His jaw tensed. He started to stand mouth open to object, but 2 MPs in dress blues appeared like ghosts at his side. One gently placed a hand on his shoulder. The other unclipped the cuffs. He froze. My father didn't move, didn't speak. His posture was still straight, but his face was pale hollow. I had never seen him look so small. Shepard didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The Army holds itself to the highest standard. No one, regardless of rank or name, is above it. Today, justice begins. The MPs moved. Jesse didn't resist. He didn't even speak. He was walked off the stage in front of everyone, fellow officers, generals, former mentors. His boots echoed off the marble floor like thunder. Then Shepard turned his head, found me in the crowd, and nodded. Not a gesture for the cameras. Not a bow of apology or pity. A soldier's nod. Recognition. Respect. Solidarity. I stood not because I was told to, but because it was time. As I made my way toward the stage, I passed my father. His eyes met mine, but the fire was gone. The certainty. The command. What remained was something I hadn't seen in him before. Fear. Not of punishment, of exposure. His kingdom had crumbled, and I wasn't his disappointment anymore. I was the reckoning. I walked up the steps, not to speak, just to stand there, to bear witness, to let the weight of what had just happened settle into the room like ash. I didn't need applause, I didn't want vindication, I just needed the truth to stand. And it did. As I stepped down and walked past the cameras, past the stunned silence, past the legacy I had just dismantled, I didn't look back. Because this wasn't a victory lap. This was the final whisper that brought the house down. A small brass plaque on my office door read, "The Whisper Room." It was Eli's final gift, installed before I arrived, quiet as always. No fanfare. Just those 2 words engraved in clean serif letters affixed beside the door of a classroom tucked at the edge of Fort Leonard Wood's military police school. It stopped me the first time I saw it. I stood there in the empty hallway, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead, my fingers grazing the plaque's surface. Smooth, cold, solid. I hadn't cried in months, but that morning I nearly did. After the tribunal, I didn't go back into the field. I didn't want medals. I didn't want a public parade of apologies. The Army, under Shepard's quiet but firm hand, handled the fallout. Jesse was court-martialed and sentenced. My father retired into silence. The name Raines was pulled from more than a few buildings, not out of vengeance, just accuracy. And me, I stepped away from the noise. Shepard had offered me a position full control to design a course for new MP officers focused on strategic empathy and cross-cultural engagement. I didn't hesitate. I moved to Missouri and into the woods. The campus here wasn't imposing. No marble columns, no brass-lined halls. Just low buildings wind through trees and a clean morning fog that felt like peace. My classroom was mine. 4 walls, a chalkboard, and rows of recruits who thought listening was weakness and language was a sideline skill. But they learned quickly that in my room, strength wore different clothes. I taught them how to read silence, how to spot a lie not from what was said but how it was delayed. I showed them how dialect could expose location, how posture could betray intent, how a single word in the wrong tense could turn an interrogation. We studied cases from Bosnia, Iraq, South Sudan places, where understanding the why behind a behavior could mean the difference between peace and bloodshed. Every lesson came with a story, not always mine, but pieces of me were woven into every lecture. My mother's dictionary sat on my desk, now bound in soft leather pages, annotated in blue ink. One day after class had cleared out, a young cadet lingered behind. Her name was Private First Class Marie Alvarez. She'd sat in the back for weeks, scribbling notes furiously, eyes sharp. She hovered at my desk, hesitant. "Ma'am," she said finally, "I just wanted to say, thank you. No one's ever told us that empathy could be a weapon." I smiled. The most powerful ones usually are. She nodded, then left, but not before glancing at the plaque on the door. Whisper. I could tell she understood what it meant. Weeks later, a small package arrived at my office. No return address, but I knew the handwriting on the envelope. Elegant. Familiar. My Aunt Lydia. I opened the box carefully. Inside, beneath a layer of tissue, was a single photograph. It wasn't framed, just loose-aged, slightly at the corners. A snapshot of a 10-year-old girl sitting cross-legged on a linoleum floor, completely absorbed in an open dictionary. Her hair was wild. Her face was serious brow, furrowed lips moving as she sounded out a word only she could hear. Me. I turned the photo over. On the back, written in Lydia's careful script, was one line. "Your father asked me to send this to you." He didn't say anything else, just that this is how he wants to remember you. I sat there for a long time, holding the picture between my fingers, watching my younger self come into focus. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't enough. But it was something. Not closure. Not repair. Just a crack in the wall. A signal across the silence. He saw me once. Maybe too late. Maybe too dimly. But still, he saw me. I thumbtacked the photo to the corkboard beside my desk, right under the plaque Eli had hung. The Whisper Room. 2 legacies side by side. I looked at the girl in the photo again. This time not with pity, not with grief, but with pride. She hadn't been weak. She hadn't been small. She'd just been waiting to be heard. I turned back to the board and adjusted the corner of the picture, straightening it until it lined up perfectly with the plaque. Then I stepped back and smiled. Class would start in 10 minutes. And I had a new story to tell. And just like that, Selah closed the chapter she never thought she'd survive, one built not on revenge but resilience. If this story moved you, leave a comment and share your thoughts. We read every single one. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories where strength whispers louder than power shouts. Thank you for listening. This has been a story from Revenge Served Cold. We'll see you next time.